Sometimes I cry when I see him. Not the loud kind of crying. Not the kind that makes noise or draws attention. It's the quiet kind. The kind that sits behind my eyes and burns. The kind I swallow because I don't want him to notice. Even though he wouldn't know why I was crying anyway. He used to be my superhero. And I don't mean that in the exaggerated, childish way people sometimes say it. I mean it in the truest sense. When I was small, my father felt invincible. Not because he was perfect, but because he was always there. Always moving. Always doing. Always showing up in ways that made the world feel less dangerous. Growing up, he was the most active person I knew. He woke up early. He fixed things before they broke. He laughed loudly. He carried groceries with one hand and me with the other. He smelled like soap and sunlight and the faint trace of engine oil. When he walked into a room, things felt steady. He taught me how to ride a bicycle. I still remember that afternoon clearly, even now. The pavement was warm, the air thick with late afternoon heat. My knees were scraped from falling again and again. I wanted to quit. I remember saying it out loud. I can't do it. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't rush me. He just bent down to my level, held my shoulders gently, and said, "You can. I'm right here. I won't let go until you're ready." And when he finally did let go, when I realized I was riding on my own, I turned around, heart racing, fear and joy colliding in my chest. He was standing there smiling, proud, clapping like I had just won something important. That's who he was. He took me to school every morning when he could, even when he was tired, even when he had worked late. He made silly jokes to calm my nerves before exams. He reminded me, over and over again, that I was special. "You're a princess," he used to say. "My princess." I believed him, not in a spoiled way, in a grounding way, like the world might be harsh, but I had a place where I was safe. Back then, I thought that kind of love was permanent, unchanging, immune to time. I didn't know how fragile memory was. I didn't know how cruel forgetting could be. The first signs didn't come crashing in. They slipped in quietly, disguised as normal aging. Small things. Forgetting where he left his keys. Repeating the same story twice in one evening. Calling me by my aunt's name and laughing it off. We all laughed it off. I told myself it was nothing. Everyone forgets things. He had worked hard his whole life. Of course he was tired. Of course his mind wandered sometimes. I didn't want to be dramatic. I didn't want to be the one who overreacted. And if I'm being honest, I didn't want to look too closely. Because looking closely meant admitting something might be wrong. And I wasn't ready for that. Around that time, I wasn't exactly the easiest person to love. I was a wild child in ways I didn't fully understand until much later. Restless. Defensive. Convinced I had time. I wanted freedom more than connection. Distance more than depth. I chased experiences, noise, distractions. I told myself I was finding myself, but really, I was running from stillness. He noticed the changes in me before I noticed the changes in him. He would ask where I was going, who I was with, when I'd be back. His concern sometimes felt like control, and I pushed against it. Hard. I said things I didn't mean. I rolled my eyes. I brushed off his advice like it was outdated, unnecessary. There were nights I came home late and barely looked at him. Days I didn't return his calls. Moments I chose pride over patience. And he let me. That's one of the things that hurts the most now. He didn't stop loving me when I became difficult. He didn't withdraw. He just watched. Quietly. Hoping, I think, that one day I'd come back to myself. The real cracks showed up slowly, like a picture fading rather than tearing. He started getting lost in places he'd known for decades. He forgot appointments. He became frustrated more easily, his confidence slipping in subtle ways. He'd pause mid-sentence, searching for a word that used to come effortlessly. I remember one afternoon when he stood in the kitchen holding a mug, staring at it like it belonged to someone else. When I asked what was wrong, he smiled and said, "Nothing, just thinking." But his eyes looked distant, unanchored. Still, I convinced myself it wasn't serious. I didn't want labels. I didn't want hospitals or tests or the kind of conversations that change everything. I wanted life to stay familiar. Then came the day he forgot something he never would have forgotten before. My birthday. He didn't call. He didn't text. He didn't even mention it when I saw him later that evening. I told myself he was busy. I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself I was too old to care. But something inside me shifted. Quietly. Uncomfortably. When I finally said something, gently, he looked at me with confusion and then with guilt so sharp it made my chest ache. "Oh," he said softly. "I'm so sorry." That was the moment I knew. Not logically. Emotionally. Something was wrong. The diagnosis didn't come immediately. There were months of appointments, tests, waiting rooms that smelled like disinfectant and fear. Words like early stages and progressive floated around us like ghosts. No one wanted to say the word out loud at first. Dementia. When it was finally said clearly, it felt unreal. Like a mistake. Like they were talking about someone else. How could the man who taught me how to balance on two wheels not remember a date? How could the man who remembered every detail of my childhood start losing pieces of his own mind? I expected to feel panic, or anger, or devastation right away. Instead, I felt numb. I went into a strange kind of emotional lockdown. I showed up physically, but inside I was frozen. Watching, measuring, bracing myself for something I couldn't yet define. He tried to hide it at first, tried to laugh through his mistakes, tried to maintain dignity. But dementia has a way of stripping things gently at first, then mercilessly. He began to forget conversations we'd had hours earlier. He'd ask the same question again and again. Sometimes he'd accuse people of moving things he had misplaced. Other times, he'd sit quietly, withdrawn, like he was afraid of saying the wrong thing. I could see the frustration building in him, the fear. And then came the moment that broke something in me. He forgot my name. Not dramatically. Not all at once. It slipped away like everything else. He looked at me one day, hesitated, and said a different name. Someone else's. Someone who wasn't me. I corrected him, forcing a smile. He laughed awkwardly, apologized, said his mind was playing tricks on him. But I went to the bathroom afterward and cried silently, gripping the sink, staring at my reflection like I didn't recognize myself either. After that, it happened more often. And then one day, he didn't try to guess at all. He just looked at me politely, kindly, like a stranger you're trying not to offend. That was the day I realized dementia hadn't just stolen his memories. It was stealing our relationship. I didn't confront him. I didn't collapse into his arms. I didn't demand recognition. I swallowed everything and carried it quietly. I told myself it wasn't his fault, that he was still here, that I should be grateful. But grief doesn't wait for death. It arrives the moment love starts disappearing. I found myself thinking about the past constantly, replaying moments, conversations, missed opportunities. I thought about the years I had been distant, the times I chose chaos over connection, the times I thought I had forever. I wished I could go back to before, back to when his mind was sharp and his laughter was easy. I wished I could be softer, kinder, more present. All I had now were memories of what was. And memories don't answer you back. As his condition progressed, something strange happened. The man who once led everything now needed guidance. The protector became the one being protected. The roles reversed slowly, painfully. He'd forget how to do things he once mastered. He'd ask for help in ways that embarrassed him. I learned to speak gently, to repeat myself without irritation, to swallow my frustration when he asked the same thing for the 5th time in 10 minutes. But inside, I was exhausted. Not just physically, emotionally. There's a particular kind of loneliness that comes from loving someone who is fading. You're constantly adjusting, grieving in stages, letting go of versions of them while still showing up for what remains. Friends would ask how he was doing. I'd say, he's okay, because explaining the truth felt too heavy, too complex. Sometimes, I'd catch him staring at old photographs. His face would soften, then cloud. I'd ask what he was thinking about. I feel like I know these people, he once said. but I don't know where I fit. That sentence stayed with me, because I felt the same way. There were days he didn't recognize the house he lived in. Days he grew agitated, restless, suspicious. Days he withdrew completely, sitting in silence for hours. And then there were moments of clarity that felt crueler than the confusion. Moments when he'd look at me with sudden recognition, say my name, ask how I was doing, smile like he used to. Those moments felt like gifts and wounds, because they never lasted. I learned to stop hoping for consistency. Hope became dangerous. It made the lows lower. So I adjusted. I focused on presence rather than memory, on comfort rather than understanding. I learned that arguing with dementia only leads to heartbreak, that correcting him didn't bring him back. Acceptance didn't come all at once. It came in fragments. I stopped asking him if he remembered me. I stopped testing him. I stopped measuring how much of him was still there. Instead, I started meeting him where he was. Some days, that meant sitting quietly beside him, saying nothing. Some days, it meant answering the same question again with patience I didn't know I had. Some days, it meant holding his hand while he slept, wondering if he felt safe. Ironically, as he forgot who I was, I began to understand who I had been. I saw my younger self more clearly. The impatience, the entitlement, the assumption that time was endless. Dementia has a way of exposing regret without saying a word. There were nights I lay awake thinking about all the things I never said, all the apologies I assumed I'd have time to make, all the gratitude I didn't express because it felt obvious. Now, nothing was obvious. There came a point when he no longer recognized me at all. Not sometimes. Not on bad days. All the time. I became a familiar stranger. Someone he was comfortable with, but couldn't place. He'd ask who I was, and I'd answer gently, watching confusion ripple across his face. Sometimes he'd nod. Sometimes he'd laugh. Sometimes he'd look afraid. I learned not to take it personally, but that didn't mean it didn't hurt. Watching the man who once called me his princess look through me like I was nothing, it broke something deep inside me. And yet, strangely, it also softened me. Because love changed shape. It stopped being about being seen. It became about staying. Even when recognition was gone. Even when gratitude was impossible. I stayed. There was no dramatic confrontation with the disease. No moment of rage. Just a slow surrender to reality. Dementia doesn't take everything at once. It takes it in layers. And each layer hurts in a different way. It took his stories. Then his confidence. Then his independence. Then his sense of self. Sometimes I wondered if he felt it happening. If somewhere inside him, he knew he was disappearing. One afternoon, during a rare moment of clarity, he looked at me and said, "I don't feel like myself anymore." I didn't know what to say. So I just said, "I know." And we sat there together, two people grieving the same loss from opposite sides. As the months passed, I stopped wishing he would remember me. Instead, I wished he would feel peace. I realized something important during that time. Love isn't proven by memory. It's proven by presence. Even when he didn't know who I was, he responded to gentleness, to warmth, to kindness. Somewhere deeper than memory, something still recognized care. And I held on to that. I forgave myself for the years I couldn't get back. Not because they didn't matter, but because punishment wouldn't bring him back. I learned that regret can either imprison you or teach you. I chose to let it teach me. I became slower, more intentional, more patient with people. I stopped assuming tomorrow was guaranteed. I started saying what I felt when I felt it, because I had seen what happens when time runs out quietly. Now, when I see him, sometimes I still cry. Not because I don't know who he is, but because I know exactly who he was. And because I know that love doesn't disappear just because memory does. He may not remember being my superhero, but he taught me how to be strong in ways he'll never forget. Even if I'm the only one who remembers now. And maybe that's enough. If you're reading this and carrying regret, or loving someone who is slowly fading, or wishing you could go back and do things differently, tell me how you cope. Tell me what you've learned. I could really use your advice in the comments.